Um, Good morning. Thanks for this opportunity to share what we're doing in West Virginia in regard to childcare advocacy. We've formed a really great team in West Virginia over the last few years, and there's three people that are joining me today. So I will introduce them real quick. Jennifer Trippett is a child care center director in Bridgeport, West Virginia. Her center is Cubby's Child Care Center. It's one of the largest programs in the state, and she's going to be sharing her experience. Tiffany Gale is a family child care provider, owner director in Weirton, West Virginia. She is also the executive director of the West Virginia Women's Alliance. And Melissa Calagrasso is a child care center owner and advocate in Oak Hill, West Virginia. Her program is A Place to Grow. So I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about the West Virginia Association for Young Children. We are a membership association of child care providers, college professors, pre-K teachers, and really anyone interested in early childhood education and supporting children and families. There are early childhood associations similar to ours in most every state across the country, but we're small. We're one of the smaller ones. I know in Ohio, I think there's multiple employees, and they have a giant conference every year. But with due to our population, we're just a small association, but we're pretty powerful, I would think. The association began in 1975, so we're almost at 50 years old. And it started as an affiliate of the Southern Early Childhood Association, which is 12 southern states, like down through Texas, Florida, and we are the most northern of the southern states in the Southern Early Childhood Association. And also of the National Association for the Education of Young Children, which is known as NACI. NACI is the largest national association for childcare providers, and is also the accrediting body for childcare centers. So the association has changed a lot over the last few years. We currently have 175 members, and we're always looking to recruit new members to build our association. And up until 2022, everything was completely volunteer based. So we had a volunteer board, never had a paid employee to help organize this work or build the association. But in 2022, we received funding from a grant that was called The Earlier the Better. And The Earlier the Better was a 75th anniversary Benetton Foundation grant. This was a 3-year grant, and in the second year of the grant, the grantee began looking for a group or association to house the work that they'd been doing, which mostly was one piece of it was a childcare policy and advocacy group, and then also a business and leadership group. And that's when they approached WVAYC with the idea of creating this executive director position, so that some of the great things that they'd started could continue once that grant was over. So that's how. So I was previously the secretary on the board for WVAYC, and that's how I kind of came into this position. I had previously been a child care resource and referral director, and now moved over to WVAYC full time. So until that time, one of the main things that we did as an association was our annual directors retreat, which was mainly geared towards childcare program directors and owners, and focused on like business strategies and tips and tricks for running a childcare program. But since this position has been in place, we've really been able to expand our reach and our goals. Now that we have a little bit more capacity to do so, we started looking at different types of professional development to offer, and we're approved to offer training credits through our state training and registry system now, which is called West Virginia STARS. We developed a family child care committee, which Tiffany will go into a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And we've continued our advocacy group, which has been probably the biggest thing that we've done over the last couple of years. So this slide shows just a little bit about our director's retreat. This last year, we brought a lady from Texas to talk about business strategies and things that providers can do to help with their businesses. This was our 6th director's retreat. We did not do one in 2020. But we had around 125 participants this year, so that was the largest group that we've had so far. This slide shows our advocacy team members. We've added a couple of new members over the last year so that we can have a good representation of all types of organizations that work on behalf of children. So we look for organizations with the same mission and vision for supporting children and families. We have 1 to 2 members from each of these groups, and we meet bi-weekly, which bi-weekly seems like a lot, but we're constantly thinking of new strategies and actions that we can work on. I think we're all waiting for a little bit of downtime, maybe in June, I'm not sure. We wanted to also, you'll see on the group, we want to make sure that we included childcare owners and directors from various parts of the state, as well as family childcare. This slide shows the one-pager that was developed by our advocacy group. We use this throughout the year and mostly during the legislative session. It has the same priorities that we had last year, which is, paying childcare subsidies based on enrollment rather than a child's daily attendance, and then also covering the cost of childcare for childcare employees. So anyone working in childcare would then have care for their own children covered with the state subsidies. We added some statistics to the second page just to show how West Virginia is basically a childcare desert, and the cost is higher than what a lot of people can afford. You'll see that West Virginia is 50th in accessibility, with 42% of children under the age of 6 unable to access childcare. So, it really is a crisis. This is our Mapping the Gap tool. It was a partnership with Team for West Virginia Children and Childcare Aware of America. And it is a wonderful tool. We share it with everybody. I think that other states have similar tools to this or like this, but you can search for you can search the capacity, childcare license capacity in you can use the counties or Senate districts or House districts. And then you can also narrow it down by childcare center, family childcare, Head Start, school age program, summer program. And it'll show you exactly. So this right now you're seeing that the license capacity is 37,253. Those are licensed spots. Those are not available spots, because over the last couple of years, a lot of people have had to close programs. They don't have staff to be able to care for as many children as they're licensed for. So capacity is actually a lot less than that. And then it has the number of children under the age of 6 that cannot access care. This tool uses census data and also the current childcare provider lists to get these numbers. It's a very eye-opening tool to use, and we make sure to share it with everybody. One of the things that we've started offering is more professional development. And one of our partners, who I believe she's on the call today too, she works for Moms Rising. Her name's Amy Jo Hutchinson, and she's presented our Childcare Advocacy 101 training for us. The training was developed with Amy Jo and also another one of our partners that works with the Save the Children Action Network. This is a training that we plan to offer, throughout the year in an effort to get more people involved with advocacy. We've learned over the last couple months that a lot of childcare providers don't realize that their funding might be in jeopardy. And also, many of them don't understand that advocating is basically just it's telling their story and telling their story to the right people that can make a difference. So, Amy Jo does a great job at explaining, the steps, what it's involved, defining certain things. So we're really proud of this training that we've been able to offer. And we've had 3 sessions so far with 49 participants, which if you've ever done a training in West Virginia, 49 participants, that's a lot of participants. So before I hand it off to Jennifer, I'm going to just kind of explain a little bit about the different types of childcare programs, because all states are so different and there's different wording that's used. It's really hard to define unless you know exactly what they mean. So in West Virginia, Child Care Center is a program that can have 13 or more children in a designated building. And then there's differing sizes. They can be 25 children or 500 children. There's different types, but 13 or more, you have that designation as a child care center. A family child care facility is a program that has 2 or more staff, and they can care for up to 12 children, either in the provider owner's home or in a separate building. And then family child care is an individual provider that can care for up to 6 children in their own home, and they don't have to have another person present. A lot of states recognize family, friend, and neighbor care, and they're able to receive subsidies and grants based on that designation, but West Virginia does not recognize the family, friend, and neighbor care. So Jennifer, I'm going to hand it over to you, and she's going to tell you a little bit about her experience.
Thanks, Christy. My name's Jennifer Trippett, and I'm here to talk about the obstacles that childcare programs face in West Virginia. I've been a director of a family-run center for the past 28 years, and we have grown into the largest childcare center in the state. We are currently licensed for 643 children, but we're currently serving slightly over 400, and I have over 400 on a wait list. We are struggling now more than ever before to keep our doors open. The biggest, Christy, did you want to share that video now or at the end, or does it matter?
I can share it whenever you'd like.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and share that video, and then I can explain it a little bit.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Alicia and Craig needed an early care and education program for their 2-year-old son, Jaden. Eventually, they found a suitable child care center nearby that offers a nurturing environment for Jaden and is open while they're at work. But it costs nearly $10,000 per year. That's more than a mortgage in most states. Even though they're paying the average price for childcare, it's a financial burden, and now they're expecting a second child. Meanwhile, Jaden's teacher, Sonia, is worrying about how to put food on her own table. Even though she has a bachelor's degree, she earns less than $15 an hour. In fact, more than half of childcare workers and nearly half of preschool and kindergarten teachers reside in families that utilize public assistance. Childcare is complex work that can impact children throughout their lives. Yet Sonia, like many early educators, doesn't receive benefits like health insurance and paid leave. So why do early childhood teachers earn so little when parents pay so much for childcare? There's a flaw in the system. Parent fees alone are not enough to fund quality early education. Let's look at the facts. Parents pay an average of $10,000 annually for center-based care. In certain locations, and depending on the age of the child, the average cost for licensed childcare is even higher. Let's take a closer look at Jaden's Child Care Center. He's one of 40 children attending full-time. Family payments equal $400,000 a year. About 12% goes to rent, utilities, and maintenance. 23% goes for classroom materials, food, and administrative costs. This leaves about $260,000 for personnel. Early care and education is labor-intensive and requires low adult-to-child ratios to ensure quality interactions. Jaden's Center, open 10 hours a day with 40 children and 3 classrooms, needs at least 3 lead teachers, 6 assistant teachers, and 1 director. The remaining money doesn't allow for median salaries, let alone benefits. Parents can't afford to pay. Teachers can't afford to stay. Public investment is the way. We invest in education for older children. Why not for all children? Here's how we can advocate for more public investment in early education programs. Invest in early care and education as other industrialized nations do. If parents are charged, ensure no family pays more than 7% of their income on childcare. Ensure that all teachers have better compensation and workplace support. Those caring for our youngest should at least be paid on par with kindergarten teachers. Question your legislators and candidates about their response to these issues. So let's invest in our teachers and children. Together, we can make it right for children, their families, and their teachers.
Thanks, Christy. So the biggest obstacle that I'm faced with from a budgeting standpoint is payroll. In 2019, I could hire people at around $9 an hour, and the most I paid anyone was probably $11 an hour. I'm not proud to say that, but the reality is that those amounts were the going wage in childcare, fast food, and retail. We had a benefit over some of those other industries in that we were closed on weekends, only open till 5:30 throughout the week. Now, fast forward to post-COVID times, and every fast food and restaurant in my area is paying high school kids 12 to 18 an hour. Chick-fil-A starts a teenager out at $15, and busboys at Olive Garden are making at least 20 per hour with tips. The city of Bridgeport used to pay part-time and seasonal help $9 an hour in 2019, and they had to go to city council and ask for a pay range of 11 to 18 an hour just so they can hire people. We're talking about concession workers and 15-year-old lifeguards. Fortunately for the city of Bridgeport and retail establishments and food companies, they can generate more income by adding services, products, or expansions. Childcare has only one way to increase income, and that's to raise prices. Even that in my situation only covers half the kids that I have, as the other half are paid through the state at a rate lower than what I charge. And I have no control over those rates they pay or how they pay. Now, if you consider that my staff have to pass background and CPS checks, they have to have a high school diploma, CPR and first aid, they have to register with a state training registry program to track their required annual training hours. And those are just minimum requirements, because I also expect my staff to require specific long-term training certificates, implement curriculum, document milestones and development areas, and nurture and educate young children. Yet I can come nowhere close to paying $18 to $20 per hour. I was only able to get my staff up to between 12 and 16 an hour because we received monthly stabilization grants for 2+ years through and due to COVID, which increased my payroll by 55%. Now, with those monthly grants gone, I struggle every month to make payroll and still need to increase hourly wages in order to keep staff. Other budget obstacles that I've been faced with include rising food costs to feed 400 kids, and the fact that every supply that we buy and utility that we pay has increased substantially over the last 2 to 3 years. I have increased tuition by 17% since 2019. 17% raises infant care from $758 a month to $885 a month. But to make ends meet, I would need to raise it another 35%, which would make it $1,195 a month. And families are already struggling to afford the current prices because the cost of living has increased so much. The next biggest obstacle that I face running my childcare business is the inconsistency of income due to the way the state pays for children who receive subsidy payments. Since COVID, we've been paid for the full month for children who receive subsidy. And even though the federal government has mandated that all states pay based on enrollment instead of attendance, West Virginia has yet to provide the additional funding for this in future budgets. Attendance-based payments leave us unable to ascertain what our income will be each month, making running a business very difficult. Couple that with a state government that didn't provide any additional funding in this year's budget. And again, we are left wondering what will happen with subsidy payments. If something isn't done to help fix childcare in this state and the country, places like my center won't be able to stay open. Won't be able to stay open. And here is why. The childcare business model isn't sustainable in this new economy. It never really was a positive cash flow business, but we all made it work for years and years by working an insane number of hours, borrowing money, cutting expenses and services that were needed because the children and the families in our communities needed us. My personal struggles have been at levels I've never experienced before. I spent months last summer trying to get to the full state staffing, advertising every way I could and interviewing anyone who applied and hiring almost anyone willing to take the job. But let me tell you what I learned. The job of educating and caring for young children is not for everyone. The services we provide are too crucial to young children's development, and maintaining a high quality center is too important, not only to me, but the parents and the children enrolled. In August last year, when I normally would have accepted about 75 to 100 new kids off my wait list, I took no new kids, and due to staff shortages, I closed down 6 infant and 1-year-old classrooms. I finally just this month have them all open but 2, and I'm already worried that I'll need to close them again due to staff shortages. I don't fault my staff for taking better paying jobs. A lot of them have gone to work as aides in the school system where they're still involved in educating children, but they're able to make more money, have better benefits, and work less hours. The only way to make money in childcare is to enroll children and charge a fee. I can't charge more than what people are able to pay, or they'll choose to stay home and not work or use unlicensed options. I can't make the state pay me more for the children who receive subsidy payments, although I could opt not to receive kids who qualify for subsidy, but these kids often need our services the most. My point is that, like, unlike any other business that could diversify and sell different products or add different services to survive or double the cost of their products, the childcare business does not allow me to do any of those things. The only options I have are to raise my prices and stop accepting kids who receive childcare assistance. And if I double my prices, only the extremely wealthy could afford childcare. The only way for the childcare industry to survive is for the state and federal government to invest in early childhood education. It really does come down to funding and benefits for staff. In order to increase the availability and quality of early childhood education, we must be able to first hire and train new staff. This is crucial. The other part of the problem is that childcare centers won't be able to remain open much longer. The West Virginia legislature didn't pass one childcare bill that was introduced this past legislative session. Childcare providers can't afford to hire and retain staff in an economy that now pays teenagers $12 to $18 an hour at fast food restaurants and convenience stores. Families can't afford to pay more, and childcare centers can't keep teachers. Investing in childcare services in West Virginia would not only create a safety net for families, but also enhance school readiness, leading to higher graduation rates and increased college enrollment. Most importantly, if parents can work and afford childcare, it would enable families to break free from generational poverty. By allocating funds to make childcare affordable, accessible, and of superior quality, the state can reduce the dependency on programs such as medical assistance, CHIP, SNAP, and housing assistance. Childcare investments will pay for themselves due to increased savings in other areas and benefit children's social, emotional, and educational development. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. That wasn't right. Sorry about that.
Christy, can I sneak in with a question here?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, we got a question about the potential to bring down facility costs. Is there a way through free or reduced pricing of real estate to bring down those costs?
I do not know how to answer that question. I don't know. I mean, Jennifer, were you getting ready to say something? I saw your.
Yeah, I don't know that I fully understand the question. Can you explain it a little bit better, and I might have an answer?
Yeah,
I can ask it out loud if that allowed.
that'd be great.
Hi, I was in your PowerPoint or in the video, I think when the breakdown of the costs, it went by really quickly, so I don't remember what the exact percentage was for facilities, but it seemed pretty significant. So my thought was just if you had free or reduced price real estate, like if the building was free or being subsidized, if that would help with the costs.
I mean, at this point, anything and everything would help. I'm just not sure. I mean, some of the legislators that I've talked to have talked about, what if we alleviate property taxes for childcare centers? In my community, my property taxes are over $100,000 a year in property tax. So yeah, that would be definitely a savings area. I don't know about how I would go about saving money when we built a building and I have a loan with the bank.
Yeah, well, I think where my brain was going is asking legislators or municipalities to provide free or incentivize childcare facilities somehow. Like I know cities and counties in the state have lots of real estate. Often it's just sitting around empty. So if, there was a way to get them to utilize empty buildings or underutilized real estate for childcare, that would be, or just like to give it to you. That would be one way.
Yeah.
But I like the property tax idea as well. That would maybe be another policy option. But thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that would be excellent. I know that even some of our nonprofit church-based programs are still having difficulty making ends meet, and they do have that free space. So I think in some areas that would be an excellent idea. The what I see as an issue could be making the building up to code for childcare, because there are a lot of a lot of things that go along with space and the fire marshal and everything else. But no, I think that we could absolutely ask people for space.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much for the
you.
question, Karina, and Christy and Jennifer and others for your input there. I wondered if, well, first of all, I'd like to just let everybody know that questions are welcome. So, if you'd like to share your question in the chat, or if you want to use the raise hand function on Zoom, feel free to do that and we can unmute. I do want to just mention that we're going to have a conversation about cooperative opportunities in particular and examples of cooperative opportunities in childcare. So I want to just make sure we're leaving enough time and space for that. So Christy, Melissa, and Tiffany, I'll ask if you want to add to this conversation, and then maybe we switch into some of those cooperative examples and opportunities. Does that make sense for you guys?
Yeah, I do. So we're going to review some of the advocacy efforts and then discuss a grant that is in the southern part of the state, which would be around 10 more minutes. Would that work?
I think if we want to jump into the grant that's in the southern part of the state, and then maybe we jump into some of those cooperative opportunities, if that's okay.
Yeah, nope, that's no problem. So then I will turn it over to Melissa, who is, and then if we have time, we can go back, who is involved with a project researching childcare solutions in the southern county. So Melissa, are you ready?
Sure, and I won't take real long, but I think it runs right into what you're talking about. Christy and I have been working with USDA Rural Partners Network to come up with some solutions. The Rural Partners Network initiative is a fairly new federal initiative that happens to be, we have one in southern West Virginia. So these are smaller, it's not statewide, but there are one in southern West Virginia, set their priorities last year, and Christy and I happened to be in attendance and speaking about childcare, and the group rallied behind it. The Rural Partners Network and said, yes, childcare should be a priority. And so that was kind of started the ball rolling, and we really weren't sure what we were into. But as our group, this childcare group with this Rural Partners Network, anyone interested, come to these meetings, started talking, they did start talking about cooperatives, which is how we got to know you guys. As we said, all right, well, our USDA partner, reach out and find us someone to help. We don't know what a cooperative is in childcare. We know what cooperatives are in farms. We know what cooperatives are in a lot of places. So my role in that I think Christy wanted me to expand on was because of that work and the advocacy work that she had on this slide she just skipped, we drew the attention of the One Foundation. One Foundation is a large charitable corporation that focuses on grassroots communities trying to help themselves and support it economically, support it with education, support it with. And they came to us and said, hey, we have some funds. Can we help? Wow, that's fantastic. Yes, yes, you can help. So in that same work of USDA Rural Partners Network, working with Ohio State University in the cooperative model, we joined in this program. We named this grant Strengthening Southern West Virginia Communities Through Childcare Access and Affordability, because we all recognize our ultimate goal is to strengthen communities. We want communities that don't have childcare to have them, so people can work, so businesses can open, so it will make a community strong. And we have a lot of communities in West Virginia that were destroyed by the coal industry leaving or moving, or and so there are a lot of abandoned communities in West Virginia, and particularly Southern West Virginia, that are looking for other opportunities. We have tourism, and that's fantastic. We're the newest national park in my county, and that's fantastic. But even that industry can't find childcare, so they're struggling to hire, right? So we went about that with this Strengthening Southern West Virginia Communities. We assembled a diverse steering team. We have lawyers, childcare providers, organizers, state childcare resource referral, regional development staff, everybody that's focusing on that. We picked the 7 worst counties in Southern West Virginia for childcare access. These are the ones that some of them don't have any, or 1 or 2 home providers. These are counties that are struggling. In my county, there's 1 on what we call the plateau, because our counties are pretty big, and another one down in what we call the valley. So there's 2 in this large region. And then we've hired a feasibility study done. So we're going to focus on where would our money go? Where would the biggest bang be for the buck if we had the opportunity to expand access? And what would the business model be for that? Again, the cooperative business model is fitting into that, but now we have let another body saying, okay, let's look at this, and is a cooperative business model feasible in these areas? And what would that model be? Would it be a multi-stakeholder model? Would it be an employer cooperative? Would it be parent cooperative? Where would we go? Who are the interested stakeholders that would participate? Because obviously my understanding is you can't have a cooperative without people that want to be involved in it. So we need, if we did an employer cooperative, we need those businesses that would say, oh yeah, I'm in, help me with that. Matching in with that, the advocacy group has worked hard to develop those models that would fit in our state too. If you're going to have subsidy, we have to raise up that subsidy. If you're going to have employers pay for it all, we have to find tax incentives for those employers to be able to say, okay, this is how you'll make it. This is how you'll fund it. So we need to support these little communities, these small communities and the families in them, by empowering them, supporting the ideas of the local communities, but taking statewide advocacy coalitions to work what needs to happen to support it. So we have a lot planned in that. We're following up with the cooperative model. It feels like the best one we're aiming to, and really appreciate the support of the OSU cooperatives to do that. Turn it over because we're out of time.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for sharing, and hopefully we'll have time for Q&A about that work and how that's going as well. Thanks. And Melissa Witt, I think, was gonna share some about cooperatives and examples of cooperatives in the childcare space. Unless Christy, if there's anything else you wanted to jump into before we talk a little bit more about cooperatives.
The only thing that I wanted to share is that we have talked about what types of things that we would want to see in a cooperative, and we've talked a lot about, of course, shared resources, substitute pools. So being able to have like a pool of substitutes, professional development, and then, as Melissa said, researching in like the rural community. So those are the types of things that we've discussed as a group that we would like to see in a cooperative.
That's definitely something that we hear frequently, is with the employment and with being able to offer the benefits. And hopefully some of these options here will open up some opportunities and some ways to be able to provide those needs for you and for those across your state. We wanted to share just a few options that, of course, you guys are probably a little familiar with, but a couple of these maybe not so much. The first one is parent-led childcare cooperatives, which is the most common model of the childcare cooperative, and is and in this type, it is comprised of parents who have formed a cooperative to provide quality care for their children. So that's kind of like the last one there that you were talking about, that was providing childcare in their home for 6 children. That kind of reminds me of that same similar method. For the parent led is the same one for the caregiver led that you were talking about earlier. Then we also have the childcare worker cooperative, when a group of care providers operate their own childcare center. And this one is through employee ownership, and the workers are able to benefit from higher wages and the decision-making power and sharing in the business profits, and having a real say in how the operation works. And so that one is truly, whenever you talk about worker ownership, that's truly getting into the heart and the meat of cooperatives at its core. And so that one right there, that's going to be something that may or may not be a fit for several of your area providers, as maybe they are interested, your workers are interested in having ownership. So that's just going to be something that one of those methods that you all will have to weigh, and each individual, probably county and area, will have to weigh for themselves. And then finally, we have the employer assisted cooperative, which is used by employers to include childcare as part of their benefit package. So you may see that within some institutions already, and some organizations and companies already within, across the country, we see that. It's probably not so common or prevalent within your state, but that's where these companies are able to assist in financing and help with a big portion of providing the space, and able to help with the ownership and the employees who actually use the center. I know we've talked about this before, it's not as commonly used, but I think that there are some areas that do utilize this in a lot of the bigger cities and the bigger areas. Here we go. Okay, so now whenever we have thoughts for collaboration among purchasing, which is a lot of what you all were struggling with and continue to have a great need for. Forming a cooperative can have a lot of advantages whenever you're purchasing costs. Your materials that you were talking about was one of the major points of costs. I think it was around 25% of your operating costs that you had mentioned earlier, that Tiffany was talking about. And that is definitely something that forming a cooperative could help and could alleviate some of those costs whenever you join together and have the opportunity to purchase on a grander scale with other childcare facilities within your area or within your state even. We also encourage everyone to be aware of the potential risks. There's all kinds of risks around prepayments, arrangements around timing and quantities, things like that. Of course, whenever you're talking about children, you need a lot of food for those children. So of course, thinking about food expiration dates and whether or not that the timing is great to buy X number of cases or huge amounts of foods that can expire or go bad. So there are, of course, things to think about in that respect. Logistics, of course, also. If there's going to be a distance to have to travel, if there's going to be some other types of logistics that you're going, whether it's travel for the children or travel for your employees, that could be a potential thought for getting everyone together and being able to logistically work things out, and ensuring the group members understand and agree on the supplies being purchased. So there may be some centers that would rather use a certain brand of materials or certain types of materials and things that work in different parts of the region of the state. Maybe some parts of your region may not need, certain things that the other parts of the region would need. So communication about the what and the where, the how, the cost, all of those things, it's all going to play a big role into thoughts for talking and thinking about purchasing whenever you're doing these types of things. And then just looking at the cooperative economy of Appalachia, we have a very diverse cooperative effort around this area. There's a lot of differences, a lot of needs. You all have addressed many of those different needs here just within the childcare cooperative. Creating community-based employment too is very huge. I know that's very important to all of you, as I've seen that your employees are very important and you want to try and keep those employees. You want to try and pay them a fair wage and even offer them benefits if possible, and anything that you can entice them to stay. And that's absolutely reasonable, and that's absolutely admirable to do that. Everyone should want to do that. And that's being responsive to your community's needs, to know that the employee is going to have to take care of themselves first, themselves and their families first. And so they're going to need those wages. They're going to need those benefits, and maybe even potentially those hours. I know we heard the amount of hours that were worked were tremendous, especially during COVID times. So responding to their needs is very important. And we all recognize that, especially in our Appalachian community. And I think that's one of the things that makes us so special. And so much more in tune with our people is the fact that we are responsive to that, and supporting workplace democracy too. You want those people to be able to have a vote. You want those people to be able to have a say when they can, when the opportunity is right. And that's another benefit and another positive of operating a cooperative. And then harnessing their members' economic power. That all of these things are just a small portion of the foundation, but a small portion of what makes a cooperative so strong. And I think that we all need to be able to take a look at what we just heard from Christy and from Melissa, and know that these are definite needs, and these are definite reasons why a cooperative could fit very seamlessly and very nicely into their particular part of the region. Hannah, did you have anything to add to this one?
Well, I just wanted to add that there are lots of ways to cooperate, right? There are various opportunities, whether that's through harnessing purchasing power, whether that's through bringing together the knowledge and skills of people, right, in a worker-owned model. But I just wanted to point out that I shared a couple of resources in the chat that kind of look at some of those different models. And Melissa talked about some of the considerations for some of those different models, and we'd be happy to talk more about some of those considerations. But you can find an article that I wrote recently about different kinds of cooperatives that Melissa covered, but also examples of some of those. One of the things that we really encourage is for folks to, although if you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op. Every co-op is a little bit different because its members are a little bit different. There is often an opportunity to learn from what other folks have already done rather than having to reinvent the wheel completely. So we've shared some examples in that blog article about some folks that are already doing this kind of work so that we can learn from what they're doing. How is it going? What was that process like? And then I do want to just make sure that we credit the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives. They have a ton of awesome information about cooperatives, including some resources particular to the childcare sector. And I've put a link in the chat there to some of their resources too. So I just wanted to point out those couple of things. And then I'd also love to answer questions or hear how other folks are thinking or ideas that other folks have. Melissa, thank you so much for sharing kind of this vision around joint purchasing, substitute sharing, and business management, and whether anybody has thoughts or ideas or questions about any of that.
Hi, Hannah. This is Michelle with COAD in Ohio.
Hi, Michelle.
And hi. Hannah invited us to join this West Virginia conversation, so it's been nice to hear about different things going on there. And the state of Ohio has recently invested some money in shared services for our child care providers through the resource and referral networks, mostly through the purchase of a child care management software system. So we're all just getting our feet wet with that right now, but it is nice that they invested in that for our providers. We're all just cautiously approaching that they don't take away the funding in 2 years after everyone gets used to using it. I guess my question about cooperative purchasing is like, where do you start? And if you went over this, I apologize. I had to step out of the office for my office for a second, but I feel like we have providers who aren't cooperatively working together in any other fashion, but perhaps would be like interested in that. So where would a group of providers start in that?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question, Michelle. Thanks for asking that. And this is really a question that we get a lot of times. Anytime anybody has an idea for a cooperative, right? Folks are like, oh, we think this could work really well if we did it together. But beyond that idea, what do we do? How do we jump into that? So we encourage folks to start with really carefully identifying the economic need that a cooperative would serve, right? So that is, of course, if it's joint purchasing, excellent, right? But really kind of honing in on, well, what is the goal of working cooperatively? So in joint purchasing, a lot of times it is access to goods that are already being purchased or maybe goods that aren't available at a lower cost per unit. Sometimes it could be to reduce transaction costs of getting those goods, right? So sometimes it might be to take away the redundancy, for example, of everybody having to do that purchasing. Or it might be, for example, that everyone is paying for shipping. And as we know, in the last couple of years, shipping in a lot of cases has become a pretty high cost in some instances. So really kind of thinking about, well, what is the economic need that this cooperative is going to serve? And then the next step really is about investigating that economic need and whether there's the potential for a cooperative to serve that need. So there are a couple of different ways to do that. I was super excited to hear Melissa talk about a feasibility study. That's one way of doing it, right? Which just answers those questions around how can this be done, under what assumptions, I guess I should say, is this opportunity feasible or not feasible from a business perspective? So that's one way. Sometimes that is a useful opportunity. Sometimes that may not be, honestly, sometimes a feasibility study, if I'm just in the real world, is not always feasible. So sometimes on a smaller scale, what folks will do is, for example, a potential member survey, right? Getting out and talking with potential users, identifying who those potential users might be, and then understanding, do you face these challenges? Would you have interest in a cooperative that addresses these challenges? How might you use a cooperative that addresses these challenges? So for example, Michelle, in the purchasing space, that potential member survey could really hone in on, well, what are the highest cost items that you procure on a regular basis? Where, in what volumes do you procure those? And would you have interest in joint procurement of those items? And really kind of diving into, well, what is the potential for pooling this purchasing power, and asking the question, does it actually create the economic benefit that we're working towards with the cooperative? Because sometimes that answer might be no, right? It might be that you just don't have sufficient volume in order to create those savings that you're looking for. Sometimes the answer might be yes. And you can answer that hopefully on, it's a paper and pencil question is what I call it, right? You can answer it through some of that planning, hopefully, to make more informed decisions. And of course, we'd be happy to share some resources and talk with folks around like what that process looks like. But that's where generally folks start. Did that help, Michelle?
Yes, that did help, and resources would be great if you could send those over or out to the group. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Michelle, can I ask you a question about Brightwheel and what Ohio has done with that?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start my video for you.
Yeah. Was that something that was decided at the state level, or was there legislation passed that required them to use a specific management system?
I do not believe legislation was required. I believe that was a state decision, and I know the first year was funded with ARPA dollars. So, which is why I'm nervous about the continuation of it. I know that they have at least one more year of solid funding for it. They have communicated that they intend to continue funding it, but you know, you just never know. So yeah, they decided with the new Department of Children and Youth, which was created, that was under the last biennial budget that department was created. They then did RFP, and Brightwheel was selected.
Okay. Has there been a lot of like positive response from childcare programs?
They just rolled it out about 2 months ago, and I know from the programs so basically it was rolled out to the entire state. So any provider in the state can use it. If they were already paying for it, they were supposed to be able to enroll with the state selection of it, and then their bill was to be paid for by the state. But then there was funding specifically for the R&Rs to provide specialized shared services assistance or benefits to a cohort of providers. So we have funding in 2 of our service delivery areas is what we call them. And they, so we're providing specialized assistance in 2 of them. However, we have not received that training yet. So we haven't really been able to provide it to the providers yet. But the funding that the R&Rs got also allowed us to purchase equipment for the providers. So Brightwheel requires you to have a tablet, at least in every pod, if not every classroom. So we're working with providers on those tech needs. We're able to buy them chamber memberships. And then we're supposed to have specialized training so we can allow them to use Brightwheel to its fullest potential to hopefully reduce the administrative costs that are associated with like pencil and paper work that some of our providers are still doing.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's a lot of good information.
Yeah.
I love the peer learning that's happening here. That's like really our goal with the Appalachia Cooperates initiative. So thank you guys for being willing to share that. And like we would be happy to continue this conversation and have kind of some of these collaborative dialogues if that's helpful to you.